How was it for you, and kind of what led you to move from Russia to America?
Through my life, I've gone through so many transformations, and by now, I've established myself as not only as medical professional but also my personality. And what I've learned is the emotions are somewhat similar, like in many different. Even though, like, so for example, you say I moved from another country to America. For some people, it's moving from Iowa to New
Mm.
York City. It's the same feeling. So I've actually, and the reason I'm telling you this because I used to be embarrassed of my family and of my upbringing. Of I grew up poor with these people who like grew their own food, not because they were trying to save the planet, because they couldn't afford buying food, right? And I used to be ashamed of that. And now, because I've worked with so many people and I see how people feel the same way, especially in New York, when you're surrounded by so much wealth and you compare yourself to other people and you realize like you don't really have much to be proud of, right? Until that we come to this level of maturity, emotional maturity, then we realize that actually our story is what makes us special. And this is how we actually connect to people. So, yes, I grew up in the suburbs in Russia, in a small town that's not even in the world's map. And my grandparents, they lived in the village. So I lived in somewhat of a city, but they lived in the village. And all summers from like May, like my summer breaks from May to September, I would spend in the village helping them because the summer is the most abundant time of the produce and the things that you need to take care of. I was taking care of the garden. They were growing everything from all types of root vegetables, from green vegetables, from to cherries, and like they had it all except for like maybe wheat. Wheat was more of a agricultural grain that they would like buy, but everything, and they had animals, so they had everything from geese, chickens, pigs, cows, and I had to take care of them. And then when the fall comes and the winter, the Russian winters are long, like I saw the entire like life cycle, right? I saw how all the vegetables that I would plant in the spring and take care of and take the bugs out and water it every day. And then how all of that will get turned into pickling and fermentation process so we can have something to eat during the winter. So to me, it all made sense from practical stance. And same thing with all those animals. I would see those animals that I would take care of all summer long, like taking them into the fields and bringing them back home. And then I would see them being slaughtered, again. So the family has something to eat during the winter when there's nothing around that you can, like go into the garden and pick up your own fruits and vegetables. And there's no, there is a supermarket, but people didn't rely on supermarkets for their food, for the produce. And that instilled in me deep appreciation for this type of living. And I kind of like it made sense to me, right? So moving to America and getting this degree now and talking to people about healthy choices, like to me, it makes sense. And my friends say that I have a PhD in practicality because it just doesn't make sense to me that at all time, 365 days a year, we have access to everything that's available in the world. We have tropical fruits available in the middle of the winter, right? We have fresh green veggies available during the winter time, right? And we have access to steaks and meat, again, all year long, right? But if you look at it, so I wrote, when I studied, and I wrote a paper on a history of Mediterranean diet, and I studied what people ate in biblical times, right? And why we have those rules in religion, the people in the spring, they fast, there's Lent, right? And basically, if you live in harmony with nature, there's not much food left by springtime, when you have to like produce more food, there's not much left. Therefore, people become vegetarian during Lent, or they fast, like Muslims in Ramadan, right? It just makes sense because otherwise you just can't survive, right? And here we just, take things out of the context and trying to apply it. And people are so confused. That's why for me, how I educate people is bringing more harmony into this way of living, right? Seeing yourself, how we're created, and seeing yourself outside of this context of this society and big cities where people are utterly confused and have no idea like what to put in their mouth because they just don't have that connection with the food, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because everything you said there about appreciating the sources of where your food comes, I feel we've completely lost that, at least in most modern cultures. Because we literally go into a store, like you said, any time of the year, you have everything available. And then, I've traveled a lot and seen how other people eat, and it is much more seasonal. It's what's available in your local area, and you appreciate that. And you also go and see how other people live, like you say, the butchering of things. You gain an appreciation when you see that of how much work goes into it and how fresh it should be when it's locally, killed by a butcher and everything that goes into it. And I feel we have no association with our food anymore. It is just in a box, it is just on a shelf. No one cares where it's from, no one cares how it was grown almost. And we've lost all appreciation, which is part of the problem with our diets. Now, you coming from that background and coming to America, was that a shell shock when you came here and saw the American diet? Because it was for me. And I tell this story a lot that like you used to go into my cupboard, Eastern European, Polish like parents, and it'd be like nuts, grains, maybe some Nutella, and that was it. And you go into an American pantry and it was just like Halloween. It was amazing. Like my eyes lit up and I was like, wow, you guys eat this like daily? And it was just chocolates and chips and Cheeto, everything you wanted was in there. Yeah. To me, it was a shock. But luckily, I grew up in the other pantry. And I think that kind of translated into a healthier, upbringing. But how was it for you?
It was very similar. Yeah. Growing up, I did not have access to sugar and sweets because that's not something that you're able to make every day, right? That's something that you have to buy. So for my family, that was only something that they would like indulge in on the holidays, right? So for me, New Year's Eve, that was the biggest holiday. That's when I would it's actually still as associated with Coca-Cola. That's when I only have access to that, right? Never every day. That was like a special treat. And same thing with everything else, like cakes and sugary sweets and treats that would only be on a special occasion, which happens like, I don't know, 6 or 7 times a year, right? For birthdays of a family member. And then moving to America, yes, the abundance, right? The abundance of choices and the accessibility and the prices, that it's everything. It's like anyone can afford, the iced tea, any beverage, and this society. But I'll be honest with you, it wasn't a shock. I came here very young at 19 years old, and I was very open-minded. And my goal, the next 7 years was to assimilate and become like one of these people. Like in my mind, I was like, this is my new home. And I wasn't judging. I wasn't bringing my own culture here. I was like, I left Russia and I left everything there. And mind you, I didn't like growing up in Russia. I didn't like that environment. And to be honest with you, like when my family was like picking potatoes at in September at the end of the season, I almost like I despised them. I was like, you guys are all losers. You can buy this stuff. You don't have to, because that's very it requires a lot of energy, right? And you spend all days in the field. And I was like, instead, you can just like take a hike to the supermarket and buy it all. You don't have to slave it, for food, right? For the basic needs. And in my mind, I was very, smart. And I was like, you can buy this stuff and allocate your energy towards something else, right? So leaving Russia, I was leaving this scarcity mentality and like this poor, environment. And I was like, I'm going into this new world of abundance. And also, mind you, I came here alone by myself. So I created this whole thing. It didn't happen to me. I made it happen, right? So when I moved here, I took total responsibility. I wasn't judging this culture. I wasn't saying like, oh, that's not how we do it there. Let me tell you. No, I was totally so grateful and totally able to absorb it all and become one of these people. So the next 7 years, I ate like Americans do. I became like, that's how I ended up on Wall Street. Where do you go when you're a young immigrant in New York? You go to Wall Street to make a living, right? And I got rid of my accent. I studied. I received multiple degrees. I took theater courses, and I really like absorbed it all, the culture, the food and everything. Yes, I gained weight. Yes, I eventually became sick and tired. Like I found myself on Wall Street eventually, exhausted and fatigued with all types of health issues, whether it's like skin issues, digestive issues, insomnia, due to high stress, right? All of these things that's like, living the American dream, right? And the price that you pay for it, right? I've experienced it all. And, I began this interview saying I've gone through a lot of transformations in my life, right? And because I was able to totally embody that experience now, like when I talk to my clients who still work on Wall Street, I don't tell them like, oh, look, you're doing everything wrong. Let me tell you how to do it. Look, I've been there and I used to live that lifestyle and I understand what it feels like, right? And just because, my upbringing is different than yours, it doesn't mean like I'm somehow better. It's just that, I can share my knowledge with you. And that's why I feel so fortunate and so grateful for the ability to share myself, and inspire people with my story to either create changes in their lives or motivate people, educate people with my knowledge to take responsibility for their life and create small changes in their diet, on their plate, and therefore change the way they feel.